All right, man, peace. So, brothers, I just wanted to touch on this topic very quickly because I do believe that this is a story that the media is going to try to mushroom as much as possible over the quote-unquote holidays. And for those of you brothers who've been on my channel for long enough, you know that oftentimes whenever these tactics are used or when they're attempted to be used, especially on so-called black men, I like to highlight this because as I've been telling you brothers for the longest time, behind the so-called liberal black is always the liberal Caucasian. And one of the main tactics that the liberal Caucasian likes to use on the so-called black man is to make him believe that laws are a form of oppression, that all laws and all order is a form of oppression when that is not the case. There are laws that are racially motivated, especially in times past, there's no doubt about it. But without law, you have no order. Without order, you have no sanity. Because you can only have a sane society when you have justice. Why am I saying all this? Because very recently there was a wrestling tournament held in New Jersey where a so-called young black man, and to be quite frank with you, I'm not even sure if he's black or not. Just in looking at the footage, he looked like a white boy with dreadlocks. But anyway, a so-called light-skinned young black man was at a wrestling tournament and he was told by the referee that he was going to have to cut his dreadlocks or he would not be able to compete in the tournament. Now, the mainstream liberal sports media has tried to push this on liberal blacks so that they could take the baton and run with it and claim that there's racism afoot. Now, allegedly, the official, the referee, has a history of being quote-unquote racist. That's all well and good, and he should be moderated if that's the case. But when we're talking about laws and ordinances, in every sport, there are ordinances in regards to your hair. Not just the hair on top of your scalp, but also your facial hair. Anybody who has watched boxing over the years knows that back in the 90s, the great heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis, he had very long dreadlocks. And during the bout, he had to tie his dreadlocks up into a bun. He did not tell the boxing commission, "You're being racist. You're trying to stop me from wearing my hair in its natural state." Recently, the boxer Adrian Broner has taken to growing a big beard in between fights. When fight time comes, he has to shave the beard. Even if he was a so-called Muslim or whatever he wanted to call himself. Let's say, for example, that he was growing a big beard because of a religious ideology that he decided to embrace. He would still have to cut the beard in order to engage in a fight. That's just the bottom line of it. So oftentimes, so-called black people allow themselves to be put into an emotional fervor by the mainstream liberal media. And they do it all the time. And they know that our people are very easy to manipulate. And I want you guys to just pay very close attention to Mr. Van Lathan, the resident liberal woke Negro, and how moved he is by this story for no reason whatsoever, because he clearly has not done enough research on the topic at hand. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Welcome to TMZ Sports 7 here with Van Lathan.
What up?
Michael J. Babcock.
What's up?
Wow, there is a video that has taken over the internet today. It is footage, it is shocking footage of a high school wrestler, a guy named Andrew Johnson, a black kid who was set to wrestle in New Jersey. He has dreadlocks, but the referee told him before he got on the mat, look, your hair is in violation. You either have two choices. You can cut it off or you can forfeit the match. Now, we should say that the referee is a white guy who also has a history of using racial slurs.
Let me say this very quickly, and I'm not going to say that the allegations on the official, on the so-called referee, are not relevant to this case, but it's only relevant as far as the racial aspect is overt. If he's actually trying to uphold an actual law in the code of wrestling, then there's nothing wrong with what he did. And certain people might not like that. It is what it is. Let me say this very quickly. If this young man was as infatuated with his hair for a spiritual reason as they're trying to act like he was, then he could have just forfeited the match, or he could have quit wrestling. If he was growing his dreadlocks for a spiritual reason, say for example, if he's a Rastafarian, then he could have just quit wrestling. He could have said, you know what, I'm not going to put wrestling over my beliefs. He decided that he was going to allow his hair to be cut. You know why? Because really he was growing his dreadlocks just as a statement. Most likely for attention, or maybe he's just going through a phase or what have you. It is what it is. Certain people might not like what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, if he was growing his hair for a spiritual reason, he would have quit wrestling if he was faced with a decision that he thought was going to compromise his spiritual beliefs. And according to the reports, he was told a week in advance that if he did not acquire the appropriate headgear or head attire to cover up his dreadlocks, he would not be allowed to engage in a match. He decided that he was either going to ignore it or he came to the match ill-prepared.
So now this footage is going crazy because everyone is seeing this white referee order this black kid to either cut your hair or forfeit the match.
In order for them to really make this a racial issue, I would need to see some white boys out there wrestling with hair past their ears or down to their collarbone or what have you. Then that would make it a racial issue. If all the white boys out there wrestling also have short haircuts, there's no issue. You either abide by the already predetermined statutes or you bow out. It's not really that difficult to figure out or understand. And as I've stated, no matter what job you work or what field you engage in, there are going to be certain jobs where you have to cut your hair a certain way, or you cannot have facial hair, or if you do, you have to cover up your facial hair. For example, if you're in the culinary field, oftentimes they have beard nets. Even if you're a lunch lady at a school somewhere, at a high school or at elementary school, you have to wear hair nets. That's just how that goes. I've never understood, to be honest with you, I don't understand why in the NFL they allow these guys to have these long dreadlocks coming out the back of their helmet. You could whip guys in the face with a dreadlock, run up and down the field, shaking your head back and forth. So it's easy for me to understand why they would make him either have to wear a certain headgear to engage in a wrestling match or cut his dreadlocks off. Once again, Lennox Lewis had to make sure that his dreadlocks were in a bun for many years. And brothers who watched boxing back in the 90s, you remember that.
And this is disturbing video.
Now, his teammates are being very, very supportive of him, we should say. But to a lot of people, I'm just going to be honest here, a lot of people that I know, African Americans in particularly,
woke Negroes,
this represents him sort of having his dignity cut off his body.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To the woke liberal Negro, whenever they have to abide by certain laws that they don't quote unquote like, that's a loss of their dignity. But when you ask so-called woke Negroes, what is the next step? What is the end game? What is phase 2? Why is it that you want to stay in a country that you feel like systematically oppresses you? How come you won't go back to the motherland where you can shake your hair back and forth and grow out long dreadlocks down to your ankles and do all those things that you claim you want to do? They never have an answer. Why is that? Because pro-blacks are actually pro-white. And they're trying to figure out a way to force white people to love them. That's all it's about.
The cultural connection between the brothers I know and their locks goes way deeper than the hairstyle.
Well, if that's the case, if the quote-unquote cultural connection between this dude and his hairstyle was so deep, as I've already stated earlier in the video, why did he not just say, you know what, I'm going to forfeit this match?
And for him to kind of be put on display like this while everybody watches and have his dreads cut off.
Yeah, it's like a slave auction. See what they did to him? It was like he was on an auction block and they made him cut his hair.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, by the way,
That's the best thing you said thus far. You don't know.
we should say that Andrew Johnson decided to get his hair cut, go onto the mat, destroyed his opponent, and you can see here, and the ref goes to raise his hand in victory. He's so emotionally just destroyed here. He doesn't even care about the victory. He looks like he's gonna cry.
It looks like he's gonna collapse before he hits the sideline. Yeah, and once again, you know, his teammates are right there for him. Everybody's happy that he overcome. The crowd's going crazy.
Yeah, he overcame such a difficulty. He went through such a wild travail. He was told a week before that either you have to wear the appropriate headgear to cover up your dreadlocks, or you were going to be put in the position where you would either have to cut your dreads or forfeit the match. He decided, either through gross negligence or forgetfulness or total disregard, that he was going to show up for the match unprepared, and he had to suffer the consequences. And when put in the position where he had to choose his beloved dreadlocks or the match, he chose the match. So he didn't love his dreadlocks that damn much. And I have news for you, the hair will grow back. Hopefully he'll be better prepared the next time that he's faced with that type of decision.
Crazy for him, but just this is a microcosm. Being that young man right there, being who he is right there, it hurts to watch, man.
No, you know what really hurts? What hurts is that our people, so-called black people, are being trained to believe that disregard for statutes and ordinances is always an affront to our quote-unquote race. And the reason why I stay on top of it is because it has reverberations in other ways throughout the so-called black community. That's why our people do not respect one another, because they're unaccustomed to being told that there are ordinances that we have to abide by in order to make sure that we instill respect for ourselves and for our fellow person within our own community. That love of anarchy and entropy, it trickles over into other aspects, not just in wanting to be quote unquote rebellious against the quote unquote white man's laws, but also we like to rebel against one another. That's why if you have to walk up to another so-called black man and ask him to turn down his radio, you got to be prepared to fight. If you bump into the next so-called black man or, you know, the next so-called black woman, it might be a war. Why is that? Because our people are unaccustomed oftentimes to having respect for certain statutes and rules and ordinances. And I'm not saying every so-called black person. There's wonderful so-called black people out here who respect themselves, respect one another, so on and so forth. But there is a sizable demographic of our people who have not been taught, they've not been imbued with a love of order. They've been imbued with a love of chaos. And bullshit like this is what the super liberal mainstream media uses to once again try to put a battery in the back of the so-called black man to not be prepared, to not utilize foresight, to not show respect for himself. If this cat here really respected himself, he would have read that notice, that letter a week before that he allegedly received, that told him to either do something about his dreadlocks or make sure that he showed up for the match with the appropriate headgear or head attire. He didn't do so. So now he has to suffer the consequences. That's a part of life.
Babcock, you spoke to sources connected to the referee here. What are they saying?
Yeah, Evan, I was told that the week before that this young man was told that the headpiece that he was wearing did not comply with the rules and that he would need to fix that. And then when this match rolled around, that he was still not complying with the rules. And that is then when the referee did give him the ultimatum, either cut your hair or have somebody else sub in for you and wrestle in your place.
So the presumption
to cut his hair.
The presumption here is that there are strict rules about how you are allowed to wear your hair during a wrestling match.
Right, I've read the rules. So the rule says that your hair cannot be lower than collar length if it's not in its natural state. And
the rules also state that your hair cannot come beyond your earlobe, and we'll see that later on in the video.
They don't consider dreadlocks to be in its natural state. So if that's the case, you do need to wear a headpiece that essentially holds the hair, and that's at least what this...
And that's very common in the professional sports world. That's very common in the professional world, period. Especially when you're involved in a certain endeavor where your hair may cause an effect on the outcome of an event, whether it be a wrestling match, a boxing match, some other type of sports tournament. As I've already stated, if you're somebody who works in the culinary field, I'm sure that if you're somebody who works in the medical field, you can't be a surgeon and have long dreadlocks hanging down. I'm sure at the very least, not only are they going to make you put your hair in a bun, but they're going to make you cover it up with a cap of some sort. That's how it goes.
The sources are telling me that he did not do.
Well, a couple of things right here. Number one, there's not a more natural state than dreadlocks. The reality is that if none of us...
Well, you know what, Van Lathan, by that statement, I have to ask you a couple of questions. Number one, why don't you have dreadlocks? You know, this harkens me back to the whole Colin Kaepernick protest when Michael Smith and Jamel Hill, they hosted Sports Center, the 6, the soon-to-be defunct Sports Center, because they destroyed it with their super liberal Negro rantings. Michael Smith would talk about how Colin Kaepernick has his big afro and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Michael Smith, you getting a shape up every weekend, bro. Why are you not allowing your hair to grow out into its natural state and embrace your mushroom afro like Colin Kaepernick? You know why? Because it's good for him, but it's not good for you. Because you know that you're living a completely different life. And in regards to what Van Lathan has stated about dreadlocks being your hair in its natural state, that's like somebody saying they don't shower because they want their body to smell in its natural state. Dreadlocks are only the natural state of your hair if you leave it alone and you don't comb it. Of course, when you utilize grooming tactics on your hair and your body, your hair is going to look different. So no, dreadlocks are not your hair in its natural state. Dreadlocks are your hair in its unattended state. Certain people might not like that. It is what it is.
of us cut our hair right now, all of our hair would eventually dread up.
Yeah.
Number two is three things actually. I'm gonna add one. Number one, I would like to know how long his locks were before they started cutting. I've been looking around for pictures of the kid.
It's just like
It's just very like it's gonna make me cry. It's gonna make me cry. But like I actually the locks don't even.
This dude said he's about to cry. Give me a fucking break. Once again, and there's no disrespect to the wokety wokes or the people who have dreadlocks for whatever reason, whether it's for style or for some type of religious significance. But dreadlocks are not your hair in its natural state. That's a hairstyle like any other hairstyle. You choose to allow your hair to grow like that. And if you totally leave it alone, then you'll have a certain type of dreadlocks. Now you have people who have their hair styled into dreadlocks. Either way, dreadlocks are not your hair in its natural state. Sorry.
Even look like they come down to where his collar is.
Yeah.
That is the metric. And then number three, I hear everything that you're saying, Mike, and you've done some fantastic reporting on this. But
to you, the facts don't matter because you're in your feelings. Just say that, bro. Because that, for the most part, that's what you wokety woke Negroes are about anyway. You guys are about your feelings.
I just want a scenario where we don't have to watch that young man getting his hair cut.
Well, you know what, Van Lathan? There are a lot of scenarios that we might like, but in the real world, there are certain rules that are set up for certain reasons. And, you know, that's just how it goes. For example, if you go on a job interview, you know that you have to be well groomed. You can't walk into a job interview in a pair of sweatpants and some flip-flops and give them a great resume. Your resume might show that you're out of this world and whatever it is that you're trying to get a job for. But appearance matters. And when you're in a field where your hair might have a direct effect on the outcome of what you're doing, that is going to be a major deciding factor in the outcome of your life and how successful you are or unsuccessful you are in trying to engage in that field. And if you have a legislative board or committee who is telling you that no, you're not allowed to wear your hair that way, or you're not allowed to wear your facial hair that way, or no, you're not allowed to dress that way, you have to abide by what they're saying. If you don't want to abide by what they're saying, go start your own wrestling league for people with dreadlocks. That's all. I'm starting my own wrestling league for dreadlock people.
it's sad.
It shouldn't have come to that.
You're right. It shouldn't have came to that. He should have listened to the memo that he received the week before. Would have been problem solved.
I feel like this, and there is an investigation going on right now, but I feel like they're in a tough situation because the referee may have followed the letter of the law, but when you watch the video, you know it's not right.
Yeah. But plus
What does that really mean? The referee followed the letter of the law, but when you watch the video, you know that it's not right. Right now, that's a battle between your feelings and what the statutes are saying. Once again, and I cannot stress this enough, the real conundrum that our people are in this society is that right now, from a metaphorical perspective, so-called black people are on the level of an adolescent. Our people are like children that want to be viewed as adults. You know, like when an adolescent is 15, 16, 17 years old, they want you to look at them like an adult, but they have no idea how to really utilize their adulthood yet because they're not experienced, so they throw tantrums. They want to be viewed in a serious manner, but they're not responsible. Our people have to deal with the full gamut of adulthood and all the dynamics of being in rulership before anybody could take us seriously. And that means that we have to understand that there are checks and balances for everything, and that there are laws that we have to adhere to, and if not, people are not going to take you seriously. When you look at somebody and you say with a serious look on your face, why do I have to keep that law? And the law very clearly has no racial connotation to it. Then people are going to look at you like a child. They're going to say, see, this is why we don't like you blacks. And I say that for you wokety wokes, because you wokety wokes are the ones who are concerned with how much the white man likes you. You guys are. As I continuously state, pro-blacks are really pro-white. 95% of pro-black people are actually pro-white. And if you speak to them, if you ask them about their beliefs, they'll let you know. They adhere to things like the one-drop rule and things of that nature. That's why they'll say, oh, well, if anybody in your family is black, that means you black. Who'd they get that from? They get that from the white man. They didn't get that from anybody else except for him. But just getting back to this story, this is a non-issue. This is something that the media is trying to blow up, the super liberal media. to once again get so-called blacks, or at least the P-brain aspect of the so-called black community, into a fervor.
The referee, like I said, the history of using a racial slur. In 2016, he used a racial slur toward a black guy, and the black guy, according to the report, took him down to the ground, like slammed him. He was so upset by the slur, he took him down to the ground. Still, the referee went in front of some governing body in high school wrestling, apologized, and he was ordered to complete sensitivity training. And he did that in 2016. He has apologized, and he was allowed to go back and referee more matches.
Hey, listen.
Right, but then you know what? Back in 2016, he should have been banned from officiating. That's what should have happened from back then. Right now, we're in 2018. And the only way to invalidate this referee's ruling is to go into the rule book and either change the rule or show examples where Caucasian wrestlers were allowed to wrestle with their hair down to their collarbone and they did not have the appropriate headgear on. That's how you prove these type of cases, at least the racial component.
Far be it from me to be the guy that says one mistake means you can't get over it. That hasn't been what I've been on since we've been doing this show. I think you guys all know that. I'm not going to be on that now. But I will.
Right, but there was no mistake here.
I will say that sometimes I could make a distinction if it's working with kids in a competitive situation and it seems like you have some sort of racial animus.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I don't know how qualified this guy is to be out there. That's all I'll say about it.
Well, his qualifications can only be validated based off of how closely he adhered to the rule book. Did he adhere to the rule book, yes or no? In order for you to report this story, you should already have the rule book available for you to read from during the broadcast.
The welterweight champion of the world, Tyron Woodley, has a strong opinion on this too. Before he was a UFC champion, he was a two-time All-American wrestler at the University of Missouri, and he was one of the best wrestlers in the state of Missouri back then.
Also needs to eat some bread, man. What's going on? Like,
Tyron Woodley is also a resident wokety woke.
He is one of the best wrestlers in high school American history. He is a stud. He's been involved in this world for years. And we asked him, well, first off, he told us that he was disgusted by this video, and there is no reason that a kid like that should be forced to chop his hair off. That is ridiculous. But on a positive note, Tyron says, I want to deliver a message to this kid. I have a message for you. So without further ado, here's Tyron's message to Andrew. Take a look.
You know what I would say? I would say what Ray Lewis said to me. Ray Lewis came up to me and he said, hey, young lion, he said, I want you to roar. I want you to roar loud. Can't nobody quiet you down. Can't nobody turn down your volume. I want you to go out there and I want you to eat. Imagine Ray Lewis telling you that.
Word.
With all that energy.
Yeah.
You know, and you know he meant it, and you know he lived it. You watch the way he walked out every Sunday and every Monday and played ball. So my message to that young kid is, one, I respect you, and I admire your ability to focus and the task at hand in a pressure situation.
That's what I will say. At least after his dreadlocks were cut, he maintained his focus and won the match. That to me is the most important aspect of this whole situation. The rest of this stuff this cat is talking about with Ray Lewis, to me, is not relevant.
And go out there and whoop that kid ass.
Yeah, so that's high praise from Tyron Woodley.
High praise, and the reality is that boy put his emotions to the side. I don't know if I would have been able to.
Well, I know for a fact that you would not have been able to do it, Van Lathan, because you've already shown that you're emotionally disturbed. No disrespect, but I know for a fact that you would not have been able to put your emotions to the side.
The mat and took care of business and wrestled.
We should say, by the way, we are trying like hell to get in touch with this guy and his family, because I want to hear from his perspective. I want to hear from him. Everybody wants to hear from him. We're working on that, and hopefully we'll hear from him soon.
Well, I hope that you guys are able to hear from him soon, and once you're able to get an interview with him, I will update the case. Okay, so now this is going to be another report on this same story pertaining to the wrestler in New Jersey who was forced to cut his dreadlocks because of gross negligence on his part in adhering to the memo which warned him about what would happen if he showed up to the match either with the wrong headgear or with his hair still that long. So they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
What looks like racism to many caught on camera in South Jersey. A high school wrestler given the choice to either cut his dreadlocks on the spot or forfeit a match.
Once again, how can anybody make the allegation of quote-unquote racism unless you have footage of Caucasian wrestlers being able to wrestle in that tournament, or at least in that state, with their hair that long or longer, meaning down past their earlobes, down to their collarbone, so on and so forth, also without the proper headgear on. This is what I mean when I state that they continuously try to work so-called black people up into this quote-unquote racism fervor. The media tries to do this so that we cannot focus on what we need to be focusing on, particularly the so-called black man, that being maintaining control over ourselves and over our households so that we can have our own. They constantly want us to be dependent on trying to force the Caucasian to accept us. And a lot of cats don't see this, especially a lot of so-called pro-blackity blacks, because pro-blackity blacks have been raised mostly through feminine energy to believe that they deserve attention by lashing out, by acting out, and by overly emoting over little silly shit.
CBS 2's Dave Carlin has the story.
For this high school wrestler, it was his hair or the match. And this video taken on Wednesday has gone viral. The Buyuna Regional High School student getting his dreadlocks cut was avoiding forfeit after a referee apparently enforced existing hair rules.
Once again, I would say that I'm not even sure if this dude is even so-called black, but his last name is Johnson. So I'm going to guess that if he is quote-unquote mixed, that his dad is the one who is so-called black. But who knows? We might find out something different.
Fellow students walked up to him with encouragement, and then he won the match. But he appeared eager to get away from the referee at the moment victory was declared. We were sent rules of the match that state, hair shall not extend below the top of a shirt collar, hair shall not extend below earlobe level, hair shall not extend below the eyebrows. A cap can be worn to keep long hair from interfering with the wrestling, but he did not have a proper cap.
So in other words, he came unprepared for the match. And as we just saw by the rules already stipulated that you cannot have your hair beyond a certain length. You cannot have it beyond your earlobe. You cannot have it beyond your eyebrow. You cannot have it past your collar, so on and so forth. If I don't see any white boys wrestling with long hair, you cannot complain if they make you cut your hair. So-called blacks claim that they want to be equal with their white daddy. Cool. Your equality extends not just for the good things, but also for the things that you might not like, since you're so concerned about being equal to the white man.
And no accommodation was made. We needed to know more from school officials here in Atlantic County, which is between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. And we learned from the superintendent of schools, the student athlete made the decision to cut his hair at that moment to avoid forfeiture.
That's my point. So don't tell me about how there's some spiritual significance about his dreads, because if it was based on something spiritual, he would have forfeited the match.
Sure. No school district staff member influenced the student into making this decision. A probe to get more details about what led up to this incident is what many residents here want.
I don't think that he should have had to cut his dreadlocks or change the way he had his hair.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of things that people think. Some people might think that they shouldn't have to work to make money, but you know what? That's a part of life.
I grew up in a family of wrestling. It's rules. You can't have facial hair. You can't have long hair. And
that's normal with combat sports. In most combat sports, they don't want you to have facial hair or long hair because it can get in the way. Once again, the boxer Adrian Broner, he grows a very large beard in between his bouts. When fight time comes, he must shave his beard. As a matter of fact, there was a big hullabaloo made maybe about 3 or 4 fights ago when he actually wanted to fight with his beard and it made him cut his beard. Lennox Lewis used to have long dreadlocks. He had to wear his dreads in a bun before his fights.
From what I heard, he chose to cut his hair off, so that's up to him. The kid can make his own decisions.
The New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association confirmed that it is investigating, saying given the degree of attention being focused on this matter, the NJSIAA will recommend to chapter officials that the referee in question not be assigned to any event until this matter has been reviewed more thoroughly.
And that's good. Let them go through whatever channels they have to go to determine whether or not the quote-unquote referee decided that he was going to force this person to make this decision because of quote-unquote race, just to make sure that you're doing your due diligence. And then after that, either you're going to change the rules to accommodate people or you're going to keep them as is and people are going to have to adhere to the rules.
Something the school agreed to. The student himself appears to be keeping a low profile about that came with a cut. In Buyuna, Atlantic County, Dave Carlin, CBS 2 News.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see if there are any updates to this situation. I doubt that if there are any updates, that there'll be anything of substance. But once again, brothers, don't allow yourself to be manipulated by the super liberal media. There's just a lot of liberal Caucasians, especially liberal Caucasian Jews, trying to get the so-called black man caught up into dumb shit and making him believe that promoting chaos within himself is going to empower him. Chaos is not going to empower us. What's going to empower us is accepting responsibility and accountability. I say this all the time. I've been through many things in life where I've had to suffer the consequences for my lack of preparedness, especially as a child. And whenever that occurred, my father, he would not show me any compassion, any leeway, anything like that. He would say, you have to do better and learn from it and not make the same mistakes over and over again, whatever it was. If the school sent me a memo and I didn't adhere to the dress code or something like that and I had to serve detention, I couldn't say, oh, well, you know, how come you can't just let this pass? Or, oh, you're doing this because I'm black. Like, give me a fucking break. All right? It's time for our people to grow out of that adolescent stage into adulthood. And that means understanding the importance of ordinances and not thinking everything is supposed to go our way. Because if we don't embrace that, we can't have our own society. We can't have our own kingdom. But anyway, peace.